thank you all. This has been great. I'm David Shaw, one of the co-founders of Astrapi. So we've heard about how the supply of spectrum's finite. The demand for it is not. That's why network operators spent over $44 billion at the most recent auction. And that's why we were organized, was to alleviate network congestion by licensing what we call our spiral modulation. So existing signal processing is dependent upon sine waves using constant amplitude. We introduce spiral-based modulation using continuously varying amplitude. That's not been done before. There's no prior art here. We have over 40 patents issued or pending. We've raised over $2.3 million. We won a National Science Foundation grant. Significantly, we were one of the early members in the National Spectra Consortia. They have $1.25 billion budgeted to optimize spectrum for defense, and for several reasons, we're uniquely positioned to capture some of that this year. So the satellite providers are capacity constrained, power constrained, and susceptible to increasing amounts of interference. However, as we've learned, the customers are demanding quite a bit more. The satellite operators also control the ground equipment terminal gear that's going in those networks. Those manufacturers have a problem because the existing modulation schemes have reached the theoretical limit. So that's why the operators have to spend so much money at the complete opposite end of the value chain to meet demand by either acquiring spectrum rights or, as we've heard again throughout today, is increasing infrastructure spend to meet demand. Well, we completely unleash the economic boundaries back down at the physical layer, competing against those existing modulation schemes like PSK and QAM. So we address satellite, wireless, defense, IoT. They're all massive markets. Those folks are interested based in our ability to improve spectral efficiency. But if you look at the lower row here, spiral modulations is much, much more than that. We are completely redefining how you can think about the waveform design space and how you can improve the trade-offs among bandwidth, data throughput, error rate, and signal power. So some of the traction that we've had in our recent NSF work, we in one example, we improved the bit error rate and were able to reduce the symbols required for DVB-S2 framing techniques. So the idea was we were comparing 256 QAM to our approach. The end result was that we delivered an equivalent of a 64 QAM. That's about a 5 to 6 dB performance gain. So the idea is to transition that performance gain into the VSAT terminal market first. It's a $58 billion market. Our piece of that's about $60 million. That's our beachhead. We move up from there. The idea is to go into satellite first because of the diverse nature of the networks. It's an optimal place for the manufacturers to embed spiral modulation to meet the unique demands, again, that we've heard about all day long today. So the idea is to put it in the terminals first and deploy it there, deploy it in software-defined radios first, so we are a software upgrade first, and then we scale up from there. We're led by Gerald Prothero. Dr. Prothero has a background in physics, computer science. He invented spiral modulation while working on the foundational math. Dennis Ahern, former chief IP counsel at ComSat, was in a similar role with Lockheed. He will tell you this is the strongest intellectual property he's ever seen. We have a strong team in place. We've got a very deep bench of advisors. We now have 4 global research institutions working on this. And of course, we're now starting to push that out at select events like this one, NAB Future Labs Park, among others. So we're seeking $3 million now to build a commercial prototype for network testing. We booked $131,000 in R&D contracts this past year. We're projecting $825,000 this year. The big money comes, though, when we embed spirals in the 2.2 billion smart devices that ship annually. That is a $40 billion annual opportunity for Astrapi. But that's really not the point today. The point today is the value of Astrapi is built around the foundational IP that we have. So is there any money in that? Well, Qualcomm generates about $8 billion per year in their licensing program. ARM was just acquired for $32 billion based on their IP. 8 of the 10 largest strategic investors are aligned with our value proposition, so our likely exits based on the value of our IP. We define and control an entire new field, which is spiral modulation. Spiral modulation addresses a massive market pain, which is the spectrum crisis, and the spectrum crisis impacts 4 huge opportunities for us: satellite, wireless, defense, and IoT. Thank you.
You're just asking for $3 million for this?
Well, three is just to get the prototype in place, and that drives the value up. So then we moved to a $10 million round. We've done a significant amount of work to move it into emulators now, and by doing it as an SDR, that's purely a function of driving the value. We can certainly take more, but at 3, we think we can get.
Yeah, you may be underselling yourself. I mean, if this is real spectrum enhancement, and I've been in this business a long time, and that is you're solving one of the biggest problems in the world. You'll get anybody to go out on a date with you that you want if you get this one right.
That's the way we see it. So we've been stewards of the IP, and we're stewards of the value of the stock, and all we have to do is prove it up in one market, and we're right in all of them.
Final question: anybody working on the science of spiral modulation to increase spectrum at any level, anywhere? Well, the science of spiral modulation.
We've invented it, so it's not. We haven't licensed that from somewhere else. We've got it in MATLAB simulation now. We don't yet have it in hardware, completely prove it up, but the initial results are pretty spectacular. And then it's optimized for specific use. When the NSF work, we were basically working on synchronization. We got that. So now we're moving to the next peel of the onion. And you're right, if things hold, it is a spectacular win that changes, resets telecommunications theory in some ways that haven't been done before, and then it addresses each of these markets. It's bigger than us. We need partners to move it forward. We've got 5 issued patents, 10 patent families. Qualcomm's got 14,000, and this is quite a bit bigger than CDMA.
So, yeah. This is still a proof of concept that was done out of research grants.
No, we got the NSF grant last year. We raised and closed first round of money in 2013. Everything's organic. There's no IP coming out of the NSF work yet. There may be.
Is the company selling anything else, or is it just focused on this?
Purely this. It was organized specifically to commercialize the technology, and it fell out of the math that Gerald put together. So it's
so that whole team came together to continue to refine and get ready to fundraise to create the prototype.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly. And the interesting thing, we thought there might be a inhibiting factor with labor. That's just not the case. There's plenty of people that want to work on something intellectually challenging, and this certainly fits that bill. The challenge is really to have the funding to move it into a higher amount. That 10 million would be all going almost exclusively into an R&D lab to build more IP and prove it up in these different use cases.
What's the Rice Alliance? Is that the one down in Houston?
Yeah, that's actually, I'm in Dallas and really wasn't too familiar with it, but it's out of Rice University. That ended up being a juried review event similar to this and a much bigger deal than I expected it to be. It was broader based. But some very, very bright people. What we're working on is really esoteric, and I was pleasantly surprised with the level of engagement we had during the presentation and afterwards. It was really neat organization.
With disruptive technology, there's always credible critics.
Critics?
Yeah, credible critics.
Oh,
so if I walk outside and ask somebody, what's the number one problem with spiral modulation, what am I going to hear?
If they're not extraordinarily skeptical, move along, you're talking to the wrong person. It is a deeply thought-provocative look at what you're doing in communications theory. We are going back and testing some of the basic assumptions for all of communications. And frankly, nobody's had to worry about that because you had plenty of spectrum. You didn't have the demand. Well, those days are gone, and now you do. And so if that weren't an issue, we wouldn't be here. Everybody would come back to us once you have a radio and can show your performance gains.
So are you essentially getting ready? What's the plan to basically license this? Is it going to be a legal shop?
Well, that's we've got spirited exchange of ideas internally how to do this, but the basic idea that everybody gets is a royalty rate licensing fee structure, right? So that's pretty clear cut. There are other models that are bigger and more attractive than that based on the beneficiary is the holder of the spectrum rights, whether it's a Hughes or an AT&T or whatever. So there's some ways to do some things with that as well. But the initial deal that everybody gets is just a simple hardware licensing deal. And that's plenty big enough across all of the sectors. And the first step's defense and here. And there's reasons why we're satellite as opposed to wireless.
David, when do you
Yes,
think
sir.
you will have first working prototype?
Well, that's ideally by the end of this year. That is somewhat a function of funding. More importantly, it's how many problems we encounter moving from point A to point B. That's one of the specific outcomes of the NSF proposal is to move that way. We're trying to do some things independently with some of the other research people I mentioned, specific to satellite, to try to drive that. And it's a function of funding.
What is the biggest?
Thank you very much. It's been great.